So, hi everyone. Welcome to our February speed learning session, Why Nonprofit Tech Decisions Stall and How Leaders Break Through. My name is Hannah Fox. I'm the Customer Experience Manager at Giveffect. For those of you who might not be as familiar, Giveffect is a 10-in-1 platform with all the tools, giving, donor management, volunteer management, grants, CRM, marketing, all the things to help your nonprofit really operate smoothly and achieve operational efficiency, reach financial stability, and further your mission. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by our very own Yulia Zhernovaya. So, Yulia, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hannah. I'm so excited to be here and talk about this topic. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Yulia Zhernovaya, and I've been with Giveffect for almost 5 years. Time flies. So during that time, I had an opportunity to work in different departments, from operations to like frontline sales roles to now managing sales and marketing departments and other areas. I've been very, very fortunate over this few years to work with so many organizations across the country who are going through transition or considering transitions, right? And really see firsthand how different organizations approach this process. I've seen some amazing examples when teams move smoothly and quickly and achieve tremendous results. And I've also seen some teams that definitely have, stalls and pauses and hurdles and all of that. So very, very excited to share some of the knowledge that I gathered over these years and dive into this topic today.
Amazing. Thanks, Yulia. You definitely have seen so many organizations trying to make tech decisions. And so that's why we're so excited for this conversation today. So before we dive in, I have just a couple of housekeeping items. This is a speed learning session. It's only 30 minutes and our time is going to fly by, but we'll have about 20 minutes of learning and then 10 minutes at the end for audience Q&A. So throughout the session today, please feel free to use the Zoom chat feature to ask any questions that you might have. Okay, so let's dive in. Yulia, as you've mentioned, you've worked alongside hundreds of nonprofits that are navigating technology transition. So I really want to start here. Why do some organizations make a decision in 8 weeks, while others spend 2 to 3 years circling that same question?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm going to say that size of the nonprofit definitely does matter. So if you're a larger nonprofit, and when I say larger, not necessarily like revenue or number of staff, for me, larger is like you have IT department, you have multiple different departments, maybe data people involved, and so on. You should expect a longer, decision cycle. Maybe 3 to 6 months can be completely reasonable because there are just more stakeholders and there are more risks to be risk to manage. Now, what I've seen in small to mid-sized nonprofits, those types of nonprofits can make decisions fairly quickly in 8 weeks, or sometimes even shorter. But they do that when they treat it like really strategic operating decision. So what I mean by that, there is a clear project owner, right, or someone accountable for the transition. There is a clear decision criteria, and we'll talk more about it. And then lastly, there's a very clear schedule. So that's what typically I've seen successes and quick decisions. And on the other hand, for the organization who takes, year, 2, 3, you name it, it's rarely because they're indecisive. That's not the point. What happens is usually it's because they're stuck in predictable loops that typically falls into three main categories. So it's either people. When I say people, it's no clear decision owner, right? Or too many cooks in the kitchen and too many approvals are needed to happen, and objections show up late, and now we have to do it all over again. The second one is process. So it's unclear definition of success, requirements that keep shifting, and there is just an energy. Well, let's do another demo. Let's see if there's something better than this out there. And the last one is proof risk. So I've seen team trying to eliminate risk through more research instead of managing it through structured validation. Structured validation would be checking references, doing trial, diving into implementation schedules, and so on and so forth. But that's the difference. Like fast organizations don't have fewer concerns. They absolutely do the same concerns. What separates them is that they just happen to have a little bit more clear decision process, decision architecture.
That makes so much sense. I really want to go back to one of the first points that you made and talk
Mhm.
about the human side. So, what patterns do you see around misalignment or fear or fatigue that can kind of slow down progress for those decisions?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say the people in the process are probably two biggest one. And when we talk about people, there are so many different patterns. So we are going to generalize a little bit. But I think there's, again, three main ones that I see among teams over and over again. So the first one is, we spoke a little bit, it's just lack of buying, or there is a lack of a champion. And this pattern specifically I see when teams adapt CRM or some organization-wide technology, right? So what happened is while your development team might be on board, your other teams, volunteering, finance, you name it, resist changed. So perhaps there's some stuff that are just cling to their Excel sheets, or they just find it an inconvenience and they don't want to change their processes, you name it. So if there is no internal champion to, share the benefits, bring the enthusiasm to the team, that's where we see some decision getting stalled. On the other hand, and this is not very typical in the nonprofit industry, but I do see it sometimes, it's when a decision made by one person. It can be head of the department, or it can be executive director, and so on. But what happens that others may passively undermine it. And even though, we've seen tools being adapted, the team really struggles. The tool was bought, right? The team really struggles with the adoption and implementation. Um, the other two people pattern is one, leadership turnover. I mean, this is just so common in the industry, right? We all know, especially in the development, it's a huge turnover. So it happens so many times when person starts the project and then they are either no longer there, or they pulled in another direction and it stalls. And we'll have heard like, oh, we're just in a process right now of hiring or getting on board our executive director, development director, you name it. So we're gonna pause. And it's understandable. I completely understand it. But at the same time, a lot in many of those situations, it can take extra 3, 6, 9 months, or it just might never happen after that. So it really, my advice there, to have a designated owner that hopefully don't go anywhere, who can, in a backup plan for knowledge transfer, that can really help to mitigate the risks. And the last one is overall fear of change and culture issues. So that one is a big one because your staff may fear looking incompetent on a new system, like feeling like fear loss of control, or fear of new automation that will take over their jobs. And we see it a lot. And I remember sitting on the demo, right, and showing the demonstration when one of the, I think it was a database coordinator who commented, who joked, "Oh, this is so great. You guys might not need me anymore here." And it was a joke, but I think it's rooted in actual real fears. And one thing I'm gonna say there, it's not true. Technology amazing. It's only gonna get better, but there is so much um, human work that needs to be done in every single department within the nonprofit, that you might not, you no longer need to input checks manually, but there's so, again, much work to do with building relationship with volunteers, donors, funders, you name it. So while all of those fears are real, I think there's a way to work with your team around it and have a different culture, not the culture where, do or die, where the decision of technology implementation is so heavy, but treat it more like um, we're doing it, but there is a lot of things that we can adjust as we go. So people feel a little bit more like comfortable. Things not gonna have, change um, completely in one day. They will have time to adjust and take it step by step. I think that helps with those fears a little bit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's such great advice. And I'm so glad that we're talking about this topic just because there are so many challenges and
Mm.
roadblocks. If a team, really wants to set themselves up for success from the beginning, how should they think about forming that decision team and aligning stakeholders? Earlier you mentioned like too many cooks in the kitchen. So how can you do this without creating any chaos?
Yeah. Oh, such a great question. And like it's a common trap because, and I can relate to that, we want to involve people,
Mhm.
right? Like collaboration is great. You want to involve people. But at the same time, the moment you say we want input from everyone, it's easy for things to kind of spiral into decision by committee, or stall out completely. So
Mhm.
what I typically recommend teams to do is form a core group, like small group of maybe 3 to 5, maybe a little bit more people, depending on the size of your organization, who actually going to be driving the process and making the decision. That's your core team. The team typically cross-functional. They are just senior enough, to engage and know everything, right? Engage and demo and all the conversations. And there should be somebody who is have a lot of knowledge, but also like respect from other team members as well. Well, at the same time, I also encourage you to create an input circle. So it's a wider, like broader group of the employees who are getting interviewed early. Because you don't want to leave people like, out of this process completely. So what you can do is we want to honor people's voices. So you can interview and really understand what they like, what they don't like, what they want to improve, right? And take those into consideration as a core group as you go through the vetting process. And then the last thing I'm going to say here is um, loop in your leadership early.
Mhm.
So we don't need, they don't need to be on every call. I just want to make it clear, right? So leadership can be your executive director or maybe your department head and so on. So they don't have to be on every conversation, but depending on your leadership, you do want to involve them, whether it's a demo, a trial, a pricing call, and so on. You can decide that because you don't want to go through the entire process. And then at the end, when you're ready to make a move, your leadership asking, where did this come from?
Mhm.
Just because there is no alignment, they don't understand the issue, they don't understand why they did now. They just see it as a, unnecessary project versus something that is fundamentally going to benefit the organization. And I've seen it so many times when development team, for example, get excited and then it gets quickly the project stalls or dies just because executive team felt blindsided. So again, my advice, involve them early,
Yeah.
align early, have those conversations, prepare them. And you don't want to completely again leave them um, behind. You want to involve them where it's uh, like where it works for your organization.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love the term input circle. That really stuck with me. That's great. I've heard you say often that teams don't actually lack urgency, but they lack a clear process. What
Mhm.
do you feel like a healthy decision process looks like in practice?
Yeah, that this come up constantly, right? And for me, the healthy decision process doesn't have to be complex. It just needs to be clear and time bound. Okay.
Mhm.
So I usually give walk teams who want to move fast through a 6, 8 week sprint. And don't worry, if that's too short for your organization, you feel like 6 to 8 weeks just seems too short, it can be 6 to 8 months. The goal here is to have clear steps that you can follow and also like clear timelines. So the week one, typically, or it can be month one for your organization. That's when the internal alignments happen. So align on the goals, success criteria. Who is actually gonna be making a decision? Who is our core team, right? Who needs to be interviewed, and so on. Now, from week two or month two, that's where you put things into motion. You either interview your internal employees, you start scheduling, you start first researching, right, and then shortlisting different vendors, and then schedule initial conversation, demo, trials, and so on. Um, the goal here is that you have a clear steps, right? And every step has a purpose. Discovery, comparison, alignment, decision, and so on. And it's not about rushing, it's about building momentum. Recently, I started looking at this as I think maybe people can relate, everyone can relate to that. Think about the hiring process,
Mm,
right? When you hire a candidate, you do want to have that clear process in a timeline, right? We're not going to ask one candidate for three interview while we're asking the other candidate for five interviews, and then we're also having extra calls in between, and then we also have a different timeline. So same logic you can apply when you evaluating technologies and vetting technologies, like creating the timeline and creating those clear steps and then going through the steps with each technology provider that you work on. That will help to make the whole process smooth and on track.
hmm that's such a great way to think about it. I love comparing it to the hiring process. I think that makes so much sense. I'm going to pause just for a second. I can't believe our time is gone this fast. Please, if you haven't submitted any of your questions, feel free to do so. We'll kind of keep moving. I know we've already covered a ton of ground, but I have a few more questions for you. But just a
Yeah.
reminder to put your questions in. So, one pattern that you've mentioned before is this idea of feature checklist fixation. Why
Mm.
do some teams get really stuck comparing features and how can, as leaders, we really shift this conversation more towards outcomes and these real use cases instead of
Mm.
like, does it have this feature?
No, thank you. And I do want to clarify that I'm not against the feature checklist. I
Mhm.
actually like them a lot, and I think teams should have your must-haves, right?
Mhm.
And your
Yeah.
nice-to-haves and so on. So definitely have a checklist. Don't use them.
Yeah.
But I see this pattern all the time. Like teams go into the selection process trying to recreate the tools that they already have. So keep what they like, replace what they feeling like not quite good or not good enough, and then also trying to add what they've been missing. So at the first glance that sounds very logical, and I makes a lot of sense to me, but in reality that leads to a lot of confusion. Okay, because if there is no clear definition of success, if you haven't said this is what we're trying to achieve, then every demo ends up feeling not quite right because you're just looking for, to match your Excel sheet or looking just for feature comparison in isolation. So what I encourage, if you're going right now through the process or you're considering, waiting, looking at different options down the line, I encourage you to pause and ask the question, what are we actually trying to achieve here? Are we trying to attract more volunteers? Are we trying to attract more donors? Are we trying to have more events with less manual work? Are we trying to increase our online donations by 20%? Are we trying to get more grants? The list can go on and on and on for your organization, and it will be very different, like from my nonprofit to your nonprofit, Hannah.
Mhm.
But once you define that, you can name 5 to 7 like clear, measurable goals. And then everything changes because now you're in control of every conversation that you will have with potential vendors and partners. Because now you're not going to the demo and them just walking you through like bells and whistles and trying to impress you. You actually driving the conversation. You're going in and you're saying, like, this is what we're trying to do. This is our goals. Now, can you show me how you work with other nonprofits who are, who are achieving these goals? So it's different, more strategic approach. And you also give opportunity for, your potential partner to really step in and show you what they can do for your organization, not some generic overview of the platform and features and things.
Yeah.
Um, so that would be my, big advice. And speaking of that, also sometimes when I do have those conversations with teams, I feel like some teams tend to keep information very close to their heart. They either give you very little information or no information. It can sound like, oh, we want to improve our reporting. Like, what reporting, right? What kind of reporting? What exactly happening? Um, you can think about it as like going to the doctor's office and asking for a remedy and not really sharing any symptoms like, oh, I have a pain.
Mhm.
Can you prescribe me something, right? But like, where? What's happening? Tell me more information. So it might not be very comfortable at first, and you definitely don't need to give, concrete numbers or anything like that. But think about like what kind of data can you share that will help um, your potential partner to understand the symptoms, right? And so they can, again, step up and show you how they can support you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I know technology decisions can feel so vulnerable, and also really high stakes. I
Yeah.
guess from your perspective, like what are some of the most common fears that you hear
Mhm.
around either like ROI, data migration, implementation, and what can leaders do to really reduce that feeling of risk?
Yeah, I would say all three that you just mentioned are
Yes.
huge fears and definitely the ones that come up all the time. So ROI, right? It can sound something like, what if we spend all of this money and it doesn't work? And oh, I totally hear you. Like we adopt technology, like I adopt technology myself as well, right? So um, it's a definitely a big fear. What I would advise teams is to reduce that fear. You have to define the return upfront. So
Mhm.
don't wait for the platform to tell you like this is what you're gonna, we will help you to raise X number more donation. That might not even align with your goals as an organization, right? So think about it as like again, um, what are you trying to achieve? Like, are you trying to save time on manual work? Are you trying to increase online giving and so on? Like, define those ROIs ahead of time. So then, as you go through your first year, you can measure, you can celebrate some wins, right? You can measure the success and so on. Um, the other one, the common one is data migration. I mean, that's a huge one. A lot of teams don't even want to consider anything because of that. I was talking to someone who made the transition last time into 2012, and it did not go well. And that person just don't want to ever do it again. And
Mhm.
I mean, it's real. I understand that. So my advice there would be do your research. Like, don't put the data migration on the back burner. Really look into how each partner vendor can support, what kind of service they provide, how are they going to support? Is it a white glove service? Is it something? What do you need to do? What they will going to be doing? And really look into those details very carefully, but also be honest and upfront about your data. What data are you bringing in? Does it you have thousands of people missing email addresses or, just things inputted in different ways? Like what can you do um plan it within your organization as well? Like what realistically can you do before the transition and what can you potentially do once you do the transition? Maybe there is just going to be a better way to do the cleanup. And again, talk to the partner you're considering,
Yeah.
talk to the vendors, ask them questions and see what they're going to advise you and then see if it makes sense for your organization. And then the last one is the implementation, right? Like, will our team actually use it? Again, very common. And my advice there is you need an internal champion, someone who will, be cheering everyone and supporting with the adoption. You need a very clear plan as you go, and everybody needs to know the plan. And then also, I would say celebrate early wins. That's a big one. Um, and Tara on our team maybe can put it in the chat. We did a session recently with one of our clients, and for them in the first year, their early wins were like, well, instead of spending 20 hours to run a report, now they spend like 2 hours, or they were able to do first peer-to-peer event and so on. So those small wins will be very different for all of you, but define them before you actually do the transition so then you can celebrate it and build the momentum and get everyone on board.
I love that. I think that's such a great idea, and really such a way to think about it as, a big organizational shift and celebrating those wins instead of just this like quick technology swap.
Yeah.
So I know we're really close on time here. We don't have any audience submitted questions, so I'm gonna.
We do. We actually do. I don't know, Hannah, you might not see, but I have here a couple. We are currently doing data migration. My question is, I start building campaigns in the system? You can see it in the chat. We are currently doing data migration. My
Mhm.
question is, should I start building campaigns in the system with it being in the system? Hannah, I would say it's your question.
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely, Lisa. You can start
Oh, I
building
see.
campaigns, and your account manager can also cover a little bit more info in this in onboarding, but you can definitely start building those campaigns out. Awesome.
We have one more in the Q&A. What type amount of online assistance is offered after adopting this program? I assume it's Giveffect. So what amount of one-to-one training is offered?
Awesome.
I can quickly summarize that, and we can talk more, Amy, if you are interested. But it's the total in the original transition. The total is 9 calls. So that starts with the welcome call, and then it's 5 live training sessions, and then from there also 30, 60, 90 days check-ins. Think about them. Think of them as additional training. So it's total of 9, but actually it doesn't stop there. We also always reaching out for biannual, complimentary biannual check-ins. So you're always gonna have support at least twice a year, included with those calls. But there's also phone, email, some other supports available as well.
Awesome.
Perfect. And
Thanks.
Hannah, I think we had one question. I don't know if I thought that was a great question about the if we can address, I don't know, in 1 minute about getting volunteers move, like how to tips on making the transition from one volunteer platform to another as smooth as possible for volunteers.
Yeah, I would love to cover that. I think this is something that comes up in my conversations on the support side more often. When you think about like transitioning from one volunteer platform to another, that I think one of the biggest ways to make that smooth for everyone is going to be communication and support. So really like making sure that you're starting early and clearly explaining to your volunteers like why you're making this change and also how it's going to benefit them. So whether it's easier signups or you're going to get better shift reminders or, the check-in process is going to go a little bit smooth, being able to really show them the value and why you're switching systems. Um, and then I think, in the beginning too, providing a lot of resources to them, like, supporters are going to have to learn a new system, but being able to provide like step-by-step instructions or short videos, I've seen even teams host orientation sessions where they'll quickly teach their volunteers the new technology. Just being able to really communicate clearly and help support your volunteers. And lastly, I think just setting expectations for yourself. Like, expect that volunteers are going to need a few touch points before this process becomes familiar, but eventually it will become familiar. And then hopefully, you're in this system for years and it's going to be overall a way better transition and they're going to be happier in this system and really benefit from it rather than just thinking about those kind of rough couple of weeks transition in the beginning.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Hannah. And can you believe we're like over time?
I know.
Time flew. One thing I'm gonna say, Tara, if you can put in the chat, if anyone wants to get connected with us and talk more about anything we discussed today, tips, transitions, like definitely I've seen so many, again, successful and sometimes not that successful transitions. So very happy to share my other tips and experiences as today we just you know, kind of went through big items, but there's so much more. So definitely, please be in touch. My Hannah's email is on the chat. But also, if you want to schedule a call with us and talk more in details, there is a link in the chat as well.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a fantastic Wednesday. Have a wonderful week. And we are doing these sessions like this every month or almost every month. So be on the lookout for our next session. And we hope to see you again. Have a great day.